Now you guys, so take a look at what I'm doing here. I'm setting up my drawing like this. Do you know what this point is? Station point. So it's 90 degrees off of the two vanishing points. And so now what I can do is if I draw a box, actually let me just draw a square. Let's not draw even a box. Oh no, I do want to draw a box. Actually, maybe I don't have to. It'll make it better. What I'm trying to kind of go ahead in my. I'm trying to think strategically so that things are as clear as possible for you guys. No, this is not.
It's not.
And actually, not only is it not a cube, but it's also out of the cone of vision. But there's a reason for this that I will demonstrate. Okay, so there's a box. It's out of the cone of vision. Don't worry about that right now. Are you thinking of the cheerleader, Brandon? No. Okay. You guys will understand that reference in a week. So there's your box. Now let's imagine that was a cube. Like, for instance, one of the ones you had to draw. Okay? Now imagine we had to move it. And let's say we wanted to move it here. So this corner was there. Now I want to make one point. I don't want to deal with rotation in this diagram because we'll talk about that later. This is just about moving the object. All right? So don't worry, yeah, I know I told you to rotate it, but this would be the first step in doing that. And I want you to understand this clearly without causing problems. All right, so if I'm not rotating this, I'm using the same vanishing points. So I could do something like this. I could draw guidelines to start off with for my vanishing points, right? And I can draw a guideline for the vertical. I know it's not going to be that tall, but that's my guideline for it. Okay, now everyone watch this next step really carefully. Because it's going to happen very quickly, and then it's done. If I go like this, and I establish a reference point, you already know we can do this. And say, okay, well that's the height of the next object, right? Because that was Delilah basically all over again. But, as long as the objects are using the same vanishing points, you can also do this. Watch. Transfer the links, because it's the equivalent of doing this, you guys. If I've got a line like this, and I've got another line here that I want to be the same length, if I cut through it at the same angle, it's the same length. You see what I mean? If I cut through it with parallel lines. These are all parallel lines going to the reference point. So what that does, that allows me to find these points. Does that make sense? Any questions? Yes?
How do you do the rest of it?
Oh, good question. And this is why it's really important you guys ask questions. I didn't even think that, I'd have to show that. But yeah, I have to show that, and that's totally fine. All you do is you finish going to the VPs. So I raise the vertical, and go like that. Go like that, raise the vertical. So I basically just go back and forth between my vanishing points. And it's because this object is at the same angle. If the object were rotated, actually we'll talk about that in a second. Hold on to that thought. Now, what I want you guys to notice, do you notice how when you look at that, your brain can feel the space? Now, also, just to get your eyes acclimated to it, do you see that not only can you feel the space, but do you see that down here, you can feel the distortion?
They don't feel like they're floating.
What was that?
They don't feel like they're floating.
Exactly. And that's because they're both related to the same eye level. That's what causes that. When things start to float, it's because you've got multiple eye level problems going on. And that's one, I'm glad you mentioned that because that is probably the most common problem students have when they're sketching environments out of their head. Is they're not paying attention to their eye level, so they start sketching things at different heights, which makes them feel like they're floating. You know, it'd be great if we were all fish. But fish are great artists, man. Anyway. But yeah, so do you see how they feel like they're resting on the ground, but they also, you can sense the distortion over in that one area? I'll tell you guys, I'm not going to show you how to do this just yet, but the cone of vision is about like this. That's the area that's correct. Okay, everything else outside of that area is starting to get distorted. The further it is from that circle, the more it's getting distorted. And we can talk more about that in the next week or so. But I just want you guys to start paying attention to it. So, make sense? Okay. Let me see one thing.